And when I think of the National Football League draft, the first person I think of is my main man for many, many years, former Minnesota Vikings safety and draft savant Corey Chavous. What's up, Coach Chave? How you been? Corey Chavous.
Paul, how you doing this morning, man?
What's going on, man? What are you doing over there?
Oh, nothing much, man. Just I listened to your intro, and you said I was one of the favorite people. I hope you would say I wasn't one of the worst.
No. It's the nuance. It's the nuance of the take. It's people saying this guy did that and this guy did that, and me just laying in wait to say, well, yeah, but did you know they played against each other as juniors at like Silver Bluff High School? You know, it's the depth of your knowledge via work and via the work you put in, you know, with film study and East West and Shrine Game and the Senior Bowl and stuff like that. No, man, it's just super well respected with your opinions on some of these players, and you know, really until they start drafting them tonight, you would know better than anybody because you know people in the league, general managers and everything. You can have the best laid plans, but like when that clock's running down and you call somebody, and if they've changed the game a little bit, well then you can't get flustered. You know, you have to be ready to pivot on a second's notice, and that's all in front of us right now. So happy draft day. I know you love this day.
I do, man. I'm really excited, and I know you're excited because you love all sports. That's our connection. And I think today is interesting because when you think back just some years ago, the 2020 NFL draft, some of the names in that draft that everybody was surefire picks. For example, you know, Chase Young, you know, he was going to be this next worldly talent. You had Isaiah Simmons, C.J. Henderson, they're also going to the top 10. Because you always want to look at it, right, Paul?
Yeah.
4 or 5 years down the road. So when you go back to some of those names, there were some excellent players that came out of that top 10, whether it be Burrow, Tagovailoa, Justin Herbert, Derrick Brown just signed an extension. He's been an excellent player for the Panthers. But for me, that's the exciting part, is going back and looking at the drafts.
When you hear the name Chris Jenkins Jr., the defensive tackle from Michigan, in knowing his father was a 2-time All-Pro, 2 or 3-time All-Pro, and he played. Chris Sr. played when you played, and as a defensive tackle, he was the absolute bomb. Nice twitch for his size, very good against the run. When it comes to son, father, son, do you see much with Junior that can prognosticate that, you know, maybe he'll play like Senior?
I do see some signs. Now, he's not as big as Chris Sr. was coming out of school, in fact, but they're both very similar in terms of their explosiveness. I had a chance to play against Chris, as you mentioned, and also play with him in the Pro Bowl, and I was amazed just even during practice just how athletic he was. And I think that's some of the same slippery nature that he had, even though he was a guy who could control the point of attack with his hands and win that way. I think that's where you've seen some of the same thing from his son. And again, I've talked with you in the past about it. I felt like even though it wasn't a lot of tackle for loss production in that final game against Ohio State, I thought emotionally he was probably their best player on that defensive line that day. And they've got some excellent players up front, whether it's McGregor, Graham, you could go on and on with the names, Harrell. A lot of names on their front, but I thought he had the best game that day. It was a big reason why they were able to stop that run game for Ohio State.
How, if you were a front office or personnel guy, like how would you handle Michigan guard Zach Zinter, who's a 3-time first-team All Big Ten offensive lineman, and you know he had a bad injury in November of last year, and because of that, from what I understand, you know he potentially could be had late Friday or early Saturday. But I mean, he earned first-team All Big Ten offensive line last year before he had the injury. So, like, I mean, that's the complicated, tricky, yet fascinating nature of what transpires today, tomorrow, and Saturday, analyzing somebody like Michigan guard Zach Zinter.
Yeah, you're exactly right, because the size and the power are there, and then you've already got him having played in a pro-style system. And I think that's one of the advantages that a lot of people even see with McCarthy coming out. And not just him, with Trevor Keegan, and there's some other guys on their line, whether it be Trent Jones, or you also had Carson Barnhart, who actually came and moved from tackle to guard. Same thing with Darius Henderson. Their entire line, has experience in a multitude of schemes that translate to the NFL. And for him, it is about power. So that's the big thing from the medical perspective. How much is that lower body involved in terms of what he does on a consistent basis? And it certainly will be. But I think that for me, it wasn't necessarily a tear. Hopefully it was a clean type of break or whatever. You don't know the medicals. But I think if he does check out that way, he may go a little bit higher than some people have anticipated. And you always have that aspect of that redshirt year potentially.
Hey, Corey, why has analyzing the draft and looking at college football film, and then subsequently as your life moved on, like after St. Louis and in 2008, Corey came into the game in 98 with the Arizona Cardinals, played with Aeneas Williams, who I love. Then he was with the Vikings from 02 to 05 and finished with St. Louis in 2008. But like, where did you get bit at what point with really, really enjoying putting together draft-related content and like expanding your horizons with your videographer career?
Man, I tell you what, man, it probably happened for me, Paul, back in the late 90s, mid-90s to late 90s, because I was interning a lot on television stations back there with Rudy Kalis and some of those guys who were legends in the Nashville area. They allowed me to actually take a video camera to the combine, Paul. I know you won't believe this, and then come back and edit the video into my own piece. That was actually John Salick at another station I worked at, actually come back and edit the video piece and put it on the news and break down the combine. I got a chance to interview Belichick. Remember, at that time, he was with the Jets. He didn't have much to say, but I got him on camera. So it was pretty fun, man. They let me go in there with a camera in the combine. I think I was one of the first people that went in there into the combine with the camera, and I filmed everything.
So 20 years ago.
Well, most everything. I didn't film everything.
I understand that, including offensive linemen with gas masks on. That was not 03 or 04. But that would personally.
Well, nowadays everybody's probably in the combine. They've got their phones, so that's not that. Back then it was a lot different.
Now, Corey, 20 some odd years ago, when you were bit by this and just really became infatuated with the video part of it and the film part of it, along with the analysis of watching the All-22 the way you do, meeting these players and, it's kind of feeling out who they are and, then going back through their high school careers and things like that. It's just the work you put in is second to none. But there was legend with Corey, and tell me if it was true, because I met Corey, around 03, 04, and 20 some odd years later, we're still friends. But would you walk around Winter Park with like a duffel bag or something that had a bunch of VHS tapes in it from like the film you were getting from teams and stuff like that? Is that fable or is it legend?
Oh, no, that's the truth. I mean, I've walked around with those all the way back to college. I started my collection back in 1983 or 85, and then I just kept those all the way through and just kept adding to them, and I would go around with them all the time. And I brought those to training camp, so it would always be old sporting events, whether it was the 1986 NBA Western Conference Finals, World Series. So it had all kind of sports on there, and I would always show it to my teammates, during training camp, because I would bring the VCR. And again, that just shows how old I am. I'm talking about a VCR.
Right. And would you splice tape? I mean, would you have to splice things together?
Yeah. Well, I made highlight tapes in high school for guys to go to college. A lot of my teammates from high school, I made highlight videos for them to go to college, put together packages. That's how I ended up at Vanderbilt. You know what I'm saying? I made my own highlight tape. So, again, like that was something that in terms of making videos and editing, I was doing even back as far as high school.
Now, Corey played in that final game of the 03 season, Josh McCown.
Oh, man, come on, Paul. How are we going to go back there? That was a terrible day for both of us.
How about that? But I bring it up because Josh McCown is Vikings quarterbacks coach. Chris O'Hara, who's very smart, very brilliant guy, is like, he's a passing game coordinator or something like that. So, he still has a very big hand in it, coming to the Vikings from the champion Rams with Kevin O'Connell a few years ago. But, Josh McCown, I'm sure, of course, this, worked with Drake May at that high school in Charlotte. So I just think it's interesting that, we end up with Sam Darnold on a one-year, $10 million deal. McCown knows him extremely well from their days together with the Jets. And Josh obviously knows as much, if not more, about Drake May from their days at that high school. So, now getting up to get him, that's a different story. But how much do you factor that in? Like Josh McCown, the offensive mind, where his career is ascending rather quickly, and he's a very smart guy. I've yet to meet him, but I hear he's very smart. And his connection to May from a half decade ago.
I think it's legitimate. I mean, because I think there's also a legitimacy, when it comes to Kingsbury and Washington and having that relationship with Caleb Williams. And obviously he was there this year. So those things do matter. And I feel like one thing about May that was something probably that he noticed right away at school, because he was an excellent athlete himself, one of the better athletes that's come out of the quarterback position in a long, long time at the time when he came out. That's something that probably would impress him, because he comes from a background of athletes. His brother, a basketball player that you're probably familiar with back when he played at UNC, and just so many others in his family. That's really what he's all about. And that part of it, I think, is something that probably attracted to him when he was coaching him.
Chavous. Nordo, the producer, loved you when you played. Mad Producer, the producer, loves your draft analysis, and he'd like to pepper you a little bit, Eric.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us, Corey. And one thing that we've been talking about a ton here, and it's been bouncing around in my head, is the Vikings. The idea of them moving up, trading a ton of picks. They move up to 3 and they get Drake May. Now, what about the idea of them sitting at 11 and potentially getting themselves into a J.J. McCarthy mix or a Michael Penix? My point in all of this, Corey, is there seems to be this big gap at some point between a May, Daniels, Caleb Williams, and then the other guys. Is there a point? Do you put them in a top 3? How do you tier these guys? What's the gap for you between a Drake May and some of these other quarterbacks that are steamy to go in the first round tonight?
Well, you know me. I like to go back to past drafts, and I'm going to put you on the spot because I love that. That was an incredible question, and then you follow right along with PA. But the thing about it is, let's go back to the draft with Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow. I mentioned that draft a little bit earlier, or somewhere along those lines, and also in that same draft, Tua Tagovailoa. At this point, would you take Tua Tagovailoa or Jordan Love, who you guys are very familiar with? And he went 26th overall. So I say that to say this. Typically this time of year, there's a wider gap in terms of, like, I guess the value of where a guy would get drafted. But as things play themselves out, and we've seen that on more than one occasion, we can go all the way back to when Andy Dalton was drafted. Was he really that much worse than the other guys? Same thing with Kaepernick going in that top half of the second round. So I think it just comes down to the individual teams and how they're going to use them. But for me, I don't think to answer your question, I don't think there's a huge gap at all. Let's face it, Bo Nix, as much as we can parcel through his game, 45 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 77% completion percentage just this year. That doesn't count last year when he outplayed Drake May and won on the final drive of the game when they played each other. I was at the game, the 2022 Holiday Bowl. So that game, you got to see May versus Nix, right there in front of you. When all it counted, two guys' seasons who were going in opposite directions. May starts off 9-1, struggles down the stretch. The other guy, Nix, who's known for his legs, more rushing touchdowns in college than Jaden Daniels, 38 to 34. A guy clearly with 4.5 type speed. He gets hurt. He has to change his game the second half of that year, change it to a different quarterback, and outplayed him in the second half of that game. So you've had some chances to see these guys matched up. And, in fact, Penix beat Nix 3 times. So every time he tried to beat Penix, he couldn't beat Penix. I think there are a lot more sub-stories you got to look at. Games are important, Eric, and so
I dig that.
Hey, and a tell with Corey and there aren't many, because his career was predicated on finding tells of other players, offensive linemen, running backs, tight ends, getting a little too twitchy, quarterbacks. That's why he had such a good career. When Corey's voice gets up to that octave, he loves Nix or Penix more than anybody else loves them, okay? And secondly, like, I talked to him on the phone yesterday, and we segued over to baseball, and I mentioned the name Corey Seager. And then Corey was like, well, he's the best player in Major League Baseball. So it went like down to a level where I'm like, damn! It's like if it's super low or super high, you got to read into that thing. But let me ask a question off Nix real quick, because I know Eric has more for you. So like Nix with the completion percentage at Oregon, 72.7 last year, something like that. It's 70 or above 2 consecutive years, which is fantastic. How does he get it? I mean, not watching him, it feels like a lot of swings, a lot of shallow crosses, a lot of checks. But, like, how does he get to that 72%?
Well, I think it's definitely some of the stuff that you talked about. He was risk adverse a lot. He didn't take as many chances even this year as he did in 2022. And so I think that's probably the knock on him. And then there's also knocks on him when it comes to what happened at Auburn. I mean, although I think that could be a little bit jaded, because in his first career game-winning touchdown pass against Justin Herbert, another guy we've mentioned already here, they played against each other in his first career start, and he beat him with the last-second touchdown pass. So, again, these guys' histories are important. I do think that there's a lot of that in his game, Paul, which you mentioned in terms of just a quick game. He became a little too satisfied with that. He's got to become a better down-the-field thrower. I saw him miss a lot of those on video. So if you don't have a lot of misses and those are the ones you're missing, then that could cause you to drop with a lot of these things, because you can't miss layups. And he did that, I would say a fair amount of times throughout his career.
Hey, Corey, I've been reading up on players into this draft and sticking with quarterbacks, and Michael Penix in particular. I don't want to say people have gone out of their way to kind of chide some of the success that he's had in his last couple of years at Washington, but whether it's you got to change the entire offense because he's a southpaw, or when he gets out of the pocket, he's got a sub-50 completion percentage. How do you weed your way through that and watching Penix's film to truly determine, like Kevin O'Connell, he was talking, I watch film, and you probably do the same thing. There are things I see on tape. I'm looking for the things that, even if they're bad, I know I can fix those, versus these things, if they're bad, maybe that's a problem long term. How do you weed through things with Michael Penix to really get to the right answer of what you can expect from him at the next level?
Yeah, I think that's another excellent question, because I think it's about with them resetting his feet in the pocket. It isn't so much about how well does he do that, how well does he climb the pocket, maneuver it. Remember, those 2 tackles that he had were pretty good. Now, Rosengarten struggled at times, but Fotano was outstanding. So you had a pretty good base of blockers around you the last couple of seasons. So that also is a question mark. If there's a lot of heat, does he go back to what he was able to do at times before he had the injuries, the ACLs at Indiana? But I believe what I do like the most is the accuracy down the field. 10.5-inch hands. He could control the ball. Didn't do that exceptionally well when it was raining late in the season against Oregon State this year. But I think there were some drops even in that game. So I think you've seen them be able to push the ball down the field with so much accuracy in some of those areas that I would think would be NFL-type areas, particularly in you guys' offense, that you would have enough confidence that it would translate.
I like that. Now, to the wide receivers, we're seeing, again, projections, right? It's all projections until things truly unfold tonight. But it's Marvin Harrison Jr., top 4-ish. Malik Neighbors. Some people like Neighbors more than Harrison, than the other kid at Ohio State, Marvin Harrison, excuse me. And then you got Rome Odunze in the mix. So my point, all these top 10 picks and receivers, as we've seen over the last handful of years, you're getting so much value potentially in late first-round receivers, second round, Darnell Mooney's of the world going 4th or 5th round, although he's kind of had a little drop-off in recent years. But to that end, are these guys so potentially generational that has pushed them into the stratosphere of the top 10? Or are you, in your own research, saying, hey, those guys are awesome, but this guy on Friday, this guy on Saturday, he's going to rock your freaking world if he gets into the right system?
Yeah, I think there's some players that are like that. I mean, particularly like, for example, like how do we know exactly with the quarterback situation at Florida this past year? How good can Ricky Pearsall be? Because he was certainly pretty good with Jaden Daniels before Daniels really took himself to another stratosphere. Last year he played with Daniels, I believe it was 10 touchdowns and 11 interceptions at Arizona State. And I thought in that final game that they played together, he was pretty good in that one. But I think when you look at players like him, also Ladd McConkey, Adonai Mitchell, we've seen the excellent postseason performances from him, but has he really been the featured player within the attack? You couldn't be with Xavier Worthy there, who with that 4.21 speed, record speed, is an excellent route runner. Is he going to be the next game changer? That's another name to kind of look at. Bub Means played at a couple different schools, started off at Louisiana Tech, made his way to Pittsburgh, and a bigger receiver who I think a lot of teams like, and you don't know necessarily like what he could develop into because, again, you have to look at that quarterback situation. In Washington, we talked about Odunze, but they got two other receivers out there. You got Jalen Polk, and he also have McMillan, two guys with excellent body control that they use differently. And I think when McMillan had some issues at times during the year in terms of getting the consistency to where it was the year before, that hurt them a little bit. But those are two good receivers. So, I mean, you could just keep going on and on. It's a pretty deep class, to your point.
Coach Ave, what did you think of Amon-Ra St. Brown a few years ago out of USC? He obviously just got paid with the Lions. I love him. I loved him the first time I saw him. Sadly, it was walking off against the Vikings back left of the end zone when Cam Dantzler blew it. The Lions' first win in a year and first win at home in like 2 years in front of fans. But Amon-Ra St. Brown, do you remember what you thought of him and like why he didn't go higher?
Yeah, he was the 21st player on our board that year, and we were a little bit surprised that he didn't, because I felt like everything was in place with him, because he had even some of the things you see the Lions still do with them now, they did that with them at USC. I went to one game against Colorado. In Colorado, they put him at running back. He runs for a 50-yard touchdown. So it wasn't like it wasn't necessarily there, but I think he got caught up in another receiver class that was deep like this one, where there's so many names. I mean, we could look at Puka Nacua just from a year ago going in the 5th round. But remember his pedigree coming out. You always talk about that high school. Well, that's why it's important to look at that stuff. He was a high recruit at Washington, had some things go down. Same thing with Latu, the defensive end at UCLA this year, started off at Washington. So that's something I think that is important to look at, is where do these guys start off at? And Amon-Ra St. Brown was always considered a pretty high-profile guy, even coming out of high school, and certainly did nothing to dispel that at USC, where I thought he was the best player on their team, along with Michael Pittman and some of those other guys. I still thought he was the best player on their team.
And let's add Drake London into the mix, and that segues perfectly to Kedon Slovis.
Great point.
I mean, I'm fascinated by Kedon Slovis, because when he had high-end talent around him, he threw for 30 touchdowns. All right, then Caleb Williams and all the hype roll in, and Caleb's going to go first, okay? Well, then now Slovis is dead. So he goes to Pittsburgh the year after Addison leaves, so they're a little talent poor. Then he goes to BYU the year after Puka Nacua leaves, and they were a little talent-ish poor. So like Kedon Slovis, I haven't watched him play. What can you tell us about him?
Well, I think you broke it down perfectly, Paul. I mean, I'm serious, because when you talk about the BYU lack of talent, their best player, maybe your best target that you would say maybe coming back this year was thought to be Isaac Rex. He was a tight end, wasn't really a guy that you think would stretch the field. At Pittsburgh, he did have Means there, and he had Bumpfield, who transferred from Akron, but he was kind of working with some moving parts, but never had that supporting cast. Now, he had the offensive line at Pitt, and a really good offensive lineman also at BYU this past year, or at least a couple of them that'll get drafted pretty high. But you make a good point. With all that transition and the moving around, I don't think he ever settled back into a rhythm. And a big thing with Slovis is the injury concerns. I think that's going to be the big knock on him. If he does get drafted, it will have to be because he cleared some medical teams evaluations. I think that's probably the big thing with Slovis, because I really like some of the things that he did earlier in his career. I totally agree with you.
All right, let's bring it on home.
Hardcore football.
Corey Chavous, the best. Nordo, you get one, I get one. Go ahead.
Your thoughts on Cooper DeJean, the cat out of Iowa? Is he jack of all, master of none? I look at his versatility and I think about Brian Flores and this defense. And if the Vikings had a pick at 23 and Cooper was available, I'd love him. But what do you think?
I'm right there with you. I think it's another name that probably because you don't have the post-draft workouts, that obviously hurt him because he would have excelled in those workouts, right? A hurdle champion or sprint champion back in high school or whatever it was. And just, that would have been something that he would have shined in, kind of like Riley Moss, who came out there a year ago. Yeah. And I expect to have a pretty big impact with the Broncos this year. But I like him a lot. I think he does have a lot of you made an excellent point. He started off as a dime linebacker and safety rotating before he moved to corner. And, just talking with I know a lot of the people up there at Iowa, and they're really high on him up there in terms of the stuff that they say about him as a person and as a player. What
do you think of our beloved Minnesota Timberwolves up on the Suns 2-0?
Well, I think it's come down to really just the first game. I felt like early on, the Suns had a little bit of an advantage, but I think once the Timberwolves turned the tide, Paul, and you were at that game too, it's been really difficult, I think, for them to match up defensively, and that's a little bit of a surprise. Alexander Walker is somebody that you mentioned yesterday, but remember, when he came out of school, he was the 17th overall pick in the draft, and a lot of people, he was somebody that you thought would play well as long as he had a point guard around him, and now he's actually playing multiple positions. So you've got a lot of different pieces that you could throw at them, and it's going to be tough for the Suns, but I expect them to come back and make it a series.
How about your Heat last night? I mean, seriously, no Jimmy the Bulldog. All right, Terry Rozier's down, and I like Terry. I don't love him. I mean, he'll shoot 25% and shoot you into a loss every so often. But man, how apparent was it last night, Coach Ave, that if the Celtics aren't hitting 3-point shots at a high clip, I mean, they're in a lot of trouble,
Yeah, I definitely. I mean, I think that's the big thing. And then you have to wonder whether the Heat can hit the three-pointers at that same level. But Tyler Hero, the performance he had last night in terms of distributing the basketball, I think that was something that kind of stood out to me. I think it's been the game winners that you've seen. A couple of nights back with Jamal Murray hitting the game winner, but that was really set up by how well Michael Porter played down the stretch to get them to that point. This has been a pretty exciting start to the playoffs. Now, I wouldn't say the Orlando-Cleveland series has been exciting. I don't think Orlando's had a lead the whole series, but I know this is your time of year. You love this, so I know you've been pretty hyped up.
Well, I mean, I love it. Our squad here has me so bit. I'm hearkening to 20 years ago with Sprewell and Cassell and Garnett and Wally World and Anthony Peeler with the left-handed shot off the bench. I mean, it's just the atmosphere and just the whole vibe and the quality of the team. And Chris Finch and his staff are fantastic at the schematics and the X's and O's and stuff, man. So I'm all in. But in closing here, it's Luka and Kyrie. All right. Now they got the Clippers in game 2. I thought they looked awful game 1. But that week off where they do the play-in games, it changes things in early in series as Dallas learned. Well, then Dallas came back, played professionally. I caught Luka and Kyrie like 2.5 weeks ago at Miami, and Butler played, and I watched like a quarter and a half, and I'm like, are you kidding me? How well Luka and Kyrie are playing agenda-free basketball. So with that said, and they have deficiencies like most, how far can that duo take these Mavs?
I think they could take them at least to the Western Conference Finals, and I think they've got to, right? Because a couple years back, remember, Jalen Brunson, they went to the Western Conference Finals and they lost to Golden State with Brunson. So you don't make the move to re-sign him, and that means that you've got to be able to get back there when you get Irving along with Doncic. So there's not a lot of a wiggle room for them, and I think it would be you would look at it as a colossal failure if they don't at least make it to the Western Conference Finals, because you made it there a couple of years ago with Brunson and then let him walk.
Love you very much, man. Thanks for helping the radio show. I'll call you later today, probably on my drive to U.S. Bank Stadium for the Life Changer this evening. And we got plans. Hey, go Nuggets.
You know how much I love you, Paul, man. Man, you need to You got bothered on me. I love it, man. That was awesome.
We got plans. All right, let's keep these Wolves winning. Let's keep these Nuggets winning.
Yes.
And in a week and change or 2 weeks, we will meet in Colorado. We will do radio together at KOA, and we will go to the Timberwolves games together. Okay?
Absolutely. I'm looking. I'm geeked. I can't wait, man. I appreciate you giving me a shout this morning, man. Thank you so much, man. Y'all have a great draft, and I'm looking forward to it. I wore that purple and white. Don't forget about it, man.
Thank you, Chav. See you, bud. Corey Chavous. He's absolutely phenomenal. I mean, his quick twitch on who played where and why. And
as good as it gets.
With whom they played in high school. And the Knicks and the Penix part is worth a podcast and a listen 5 times back. It was like 20 minutes ago. Thank you, Corey. He's super sharp. Welcome to 9 to Noon. Thank you, TimberTech and TimberTech.com. What's on deck 9 to Noon today includes a wall-to-wall NFL draft conversation, which takes us to the D, takes us to the Motor City, takes us to Detroit, Michigan. Next segment, the Vox of all Voxes ever to Vox, Alan Roach, the voice of U.S. Bank Stadium and airports across the Great Divide. The white zone is for loading and unloading only. We're going to chat with the Vox around the corner. Alec Lewis is in studio at 11 o'clock, and we're excited about that. Nacho Liebert about 10, and Nordo right now with the cash thing. Good morning.
The Fan, along with BigDeck.com, they want to give you a chance to put $1,000 in your hand. Use the code BILLS at KFAN.com. BILLS. Use that keyword at KFAN.com.
Of all Voxes ever to Vox, voice of U.S. Bank Stadium, the Super Bowl, Ball Arena for Avs hockey, and much, much more. He joins us from the D, the Motor City, Detroit, Michigan. Alan, of course, is the voice of the NFL Draft. At Mile High Roach is where you can learn more via the X Machine. And Alan, it's great to chat with you. Loading and unloading in the white zone only, please. How is the setup in the Motor City?
Good morning, PA.
Good morning.
Seems to be all ready to go. It's kind of a similar stage setup as really the last couple of years. It doesn't look dramatically different. Obviously, the lights and the decorations and stuff inside are different, but it's kind of the same as it's been the last few years. And expecting again hundreds of thousands of football fans to descend upon the NFL draft.
Is the town a Twitter? I mean, I know you've been there a couple of days. Like, is the energy in the town for the draft palpable?
Yeah, it's they have to block off a big area in order to set up the draft stage itself, which is right in downtown Denver, right in downtown Detroit, right next to Greektown, very close to both Comerica Park and Ford Stadium. So it's all downtown streets, and many of those are closed, and now those are all filled with tables and chairs and, outside bars and restaurants that have extended their restaurants out into the street. So, yeah, the entire perimeter all around the draft area downtown is all filled up and ready to go, ready to welcome the fans tonight.
Alan, the voice of U.S. Bank Stadium and the Vox of all Voxes ever to Vox.
Vox.
As the voice of the NFL draft, like, what are the duties? I mean, welcoming and maybe promotional reads, but like, do you say the names? Like what's your role tonight?
Actually, of the 3 days, this is my least role, or I have the leftist role. I don't know how you can say that tonight. I do the stuff at the beginning. Hey, welcome. Be sure to go by programs. I do introduce the 13 prospects that are here tonight at the draft. I announce the national anthem. And then once I say, okay, here's Commissioner Goodell, then it's pretty much the commissioner all throughout the rest of the draft.
Any shot
now, tomorrow on?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you go.
Tomorrow on Saturday, each one of the picks is made by an NFL legend from that team. And so I will bring out whoever the NFL legend is. So tomorrow night I will announce some NFL legend before every single pick. And then on Saturday, it's just kind of a free-for-all craziness. There's season ticket holders. There's draft picks being made from each team's complexes all around the country. And so I do a lot of announcements that day. So today, pretty much I get to sit back and watch like everybody else.
Alan, as a lifetime Vikings fan, hailing from Slayton, Minnesota, Slayton go crazy. When you introduce Commissioner Goodell this evening, I mean, are you going to have to hold back on being like, ladies and gentlemen, the commissioner of the National Football League, Roger Goodell, who, by the way, any day could solve this tampering issue with Atlanta, so our favorite team gets an extra pick? Well, if you did that,
I don't think the Vikings are going to get anything in return. The Falcons could, may, and should be penalized, but I don't think the Vikings in any way will get rewarded. Is that true?
Yeah, well, it sounds like you got steam. I mean, you're in the belly of the beast with all the NFL executives. I'm just sitting here with three chins in the cornfields, hoping the Minnesota Vikings end up with a quarterback that will be the face of the franchise or super good for at least a decade. And, off that, if the Vikings trade from 11-3, obviously using the 23rd pick and maybe a first-round pick next year. So, like, when that happens, do you make that announcement at the draft spot? Is that you or somebody else?
No, it will actually be the commissioner. Actually, the commissioner does not announce the details on the stage. The commissioner would walk up and say, the third pick of the NFL draft has been traded to the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings are on the clock. And however much time is left, they don't restart the clock. However much time is left, then continues. And then when he comes up and introduces the pick, with the third pick in the NFL draft, the Vikings select and the name. And then there is another announcer from the NFL offices that will at some point announce the details of the draft. But I don't do that, or of the trade, and I don't do that.
Yeah, but with you there...
And so you kind of wonder why I'm here, don't you?
Well, no, you got a second voice. I mean, it's like the verbal version of the Monkees rolling in after the Beatles have performed.
I always love that one.
I don't know if I'd want to be that guy. By the way, as the voice of Ball Arena, you got lucky, man. Your beloved Lanch host the Peg tomorrow night, right? I mean, that. Oh, wait, you'll still be at the draft, right?
Yeah, I will miss. I will miss tomorrow night.
Okay,
they have game 4 on Sunday at noon, so I need to hurry home on Sunday morning. But I should get there in time to do that.
All right. Lastly, Vox, next season, and like the Falcons being at U.S. Bank Stadium, where Alan is he's the Vox at U.S. Bank Stadium. The Cousins game, let's call it that. Do you hope it's the first game of the season and maybe in prime time?
No, I guess I've never given a thought to the first game. What I've always been thinking is I don't want it to be the London game.
Right.
I think that kind of was a prime matchup to go to London, but to take that away from the U.S. Bank Stadium fans and move that to London wouldn't be right. So I hope that doesn't happen. But yeah, if it's right out of the box, that would be great. I think I'd rather, though, have it, week 10, week 12, when maybe there's, a little bit on the line, and have U.S. Bank Stadium roar Kirk right out of the building.
Vox, you're the best. I mean, you're the Vox of all Voxes ever to Vox. Thanks for the time on
365 days. The NFL draft is in.
Correct.
Green Bay.
And thank heavens this one is coming to fruition with all the quarterback talkability we've had here for at least 2 months. And it works. It's palpable. I mean, and it makes sense. We'll see if it happens tonight. I appreciate you, brother. I'll call you later.
All right. Thanks, BA.
Alan Roach, Vox of all Voxes ever to Vox.
Vox.
Vikes Bites next.
Fan. Welcome back, 9 to noon. It is time for Vikes Bites, presented by Thousand Hills, lifetime grazed, grass-fed beef. Delicious product. You can shop online, and you can go to thousandhillslifetimegraze.com. Big key there. Also learning about the product, regenerative agriculture as it is. But then you can shop and find Thousand Hills Elite Beef at your local Coburn's location, local co-ops as well. Thank you, Thousand Hills. You've been waiting for this all day. Power Trip mock draft that kind of started to wet your palate a little bit as you get closer to tonight's picks. But Todd, today's Vikes Bites, brought to you by Thousand Hills, is simply enough. I got the cheat sheet. I have the cheat sheet. I have the top 10 players, the only 10 guys that you have to worry about hearing their names called this evening as it pertains to the Minnesota Vikings. Let's start at number 10. If this happens, a lot of people might be frustrated, but it might be plan C for the Purple.
Michael Penix Jr., quarterback, Washington, 6'3", 214 pounds.
Penix going deep. A doomsday turned around. Found the ball. Touchdown.
Penix is coming off a season where he led the Huskies to the national championship game, was a Heisman finalist, was named first-team All-American, and also won the Maxwell Award, given to college football's best all-around player. The lefty has a cannon for an arm and is extremely accurate on his throws. He'll turn 24 years old in May and suffered 2 torn ACLs in his college career, but still ran a sub-4.6 40-yard dash in his pro day. Make no mistake, Penix is one of the most intriguing names in this entire draft process.
Cheat sheet, Vikes Bites. Michael Penix Jr., put him on the list. I'll pause 3 seconds while you that are listening grab a pen and a pad. These are the only 10 names you're going to need to know. Michael Penix Jr. is number 1. Now, PA, he's a name I've mentioned twice. Whether I gave him to the Eagles at pick 22, I asked about him with Corey Chavous in the opening segment. You can podcast that on the exclusive Vikings channel on the free iHeartRadio app if you're just tuning in. But this kid from Iowa, I adore him.
Cooper DeJean, cornerback, Iowa, 6'1", 209 pounds.
Simon feels the pressure. Hit as he throws. Intercepted. There he is, Cooper DeJean. And he's got some space in front. DeJean is going to take it for a pick 6.
A first-team All-American, DeJean missed the end of last year with a broken leg. He started as both a physical corner and a strong safety, but needs better movement to succeed in man coverage. DeJean can certainly contribute on special teams, as he was the Big Ten's Specialist of the Year in 2023. DeJean may not be for all teams, as he'll likely have to fit into a scheme to really meet his max potential.
He says DeShaun, we say DeJean. In the end, he's the mustard that Brian Flores is looking for on that defense at number 9. Cheat sheet, Vikes Bites. The only 10 players you need to worry about in tonight's draft. Number 8, I'm thinking about pass rush. I'm thinking about cool names to hear PA saying on game day. Let's check out this guy from the Big Ten.
Chop Robinson, edge, Penn State, 6'3", 250 pounds.
Dan Porter lines up a few yards deep in the end zone. Straight ahead run on first down. He is denied. Oh, he got planted. Chop Robinson.
Penn State pass rusher Chop Robinson got his nickname when he was a baby. It was originally Pork Chop, but that got shortened to Chop, which turned out to be a fortuitous nickname. He chopped down enemy quarterbacks 4 times in 2023 and also racked up 7.5 tackles for loss. Perhaps the only thing you need to know about his potential is that his athleticism has drawn comparisons to the likes of Micah Parsons and Myles Garrett. That potential, however, is still thought to need more polish.
From a pork chop in diapers to chopping down redwoods in the NFL, Chop Robinson at number 8. Number 7, we need a little help on the outside.
Quinyon Mitchell, cornerback, Toledo, 6', 196 pounds.
Smith with time, throw, dangerous pass, and it's picked off. Intercepted by Quinyon Mitchell. He jumped the route and pulled in the interception.
Mitchell had 18 pass breakups last year as a second-team All-American and was viewed as the top corner at the Senior Bowl. His excellent speed can make up for small misplays in coverage. Mitchell packs a punch, too, as his physical frame can hold up against an opposing running game. He may not be the complete package, but the 22-year-old does everything well and also could provide help in special teams at the pro level.
We heard that name, Vikes Bites style. Thank you, Thousand Hills. Quinyon Mitchell, we've been hearing that name since Alec Lewis down at Mobile for the Senior Bowl, praising the Toledo cat. Back to the defensive line. How about a fat guy in the middle changing games for a profit?
Jerzon Newton, defensive tackle, 6'2", 295 pounds, Illinois.
And looking for his defense to produce on another third down, and down comes the quarterback, Newton the first to get to Hutchinson.
Newton became the first Illini in 29 years to be named Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year, while earning consensus All-American acclaim. In 2023, Johnny totaled 52 tackles, 7.5 sacks, and an FBS-leading 4 block kicks. Newton's ability to attack inside and outside placed him among the best interior pass rushers in this year's draft. He is undersized and has had challenges in fighting through double teams, but shows off an explosive get-off and quick feet.
That's Jerzon Newton. Jerzon short for putting that Vikings jersey on, and that rounds out 10 through 6. This is the cheat sheet. This is my top 10. The only 10 players you need to worry about in tonight's draft, whether they move up and get a guy, they stick and pick at 11 and 23. There's 10 names that I have for you. It's the answer key, and you're always looking for that before night one of the NFL draft. As we start the top 5, again, defensive line, pass rush. Love this cat from Tallahassee.
Jared Verse, edge, Florida State, 6'4", 248 pounds.
3rd and 1. A lot of thinking in the pass. Batted down. Jared Verse. It is ruled a forward pass. A tremendous defensive end.
Verse was a 2-time All-American for the Seminoles, racking up 13 sacks and 21 tackles for loss over the last 2 seasons. After dominating at FCS Albany, Verse's talents immediately translated at Florida State. Though he lacks ideal size and length, he makes up for it with an explosive first step, powerful bull rush, and an ability to rapidly diagnose plays. At the Combine, Verse's 4.48 40-yard dash was the fastest by a prospect with 33-inch arms and 30-plus bench press reps over the last 10 years per NFL Network. The second fastest time came from former number 1 overall pick, Myles Garrett.
Down to number 4, my cheat sheet for the NFL draft. We're bringing Big D to MSP.
Dallas Turner, edge, Alabama, 6'4", 240 pounds.
Jefferson to the air. Gets hit. And down he goes. Dallas Turner with the takedown. A loss of 11 at the 35.
Dallas Turner is athletic and explosive, making him a coveted NFL pass rushing prospect. He was a first-team All-American and the SEC Defensive Player of the Year. Turner has a great first step, elite quickness, and an outstanding closing burst. He needs to improve his strength in taking on blockers. He's expected to be a first-year starter. Going into the draft, many have him being the first defensive player taken.
Well, he could be the first defensive player taken, but if the Vikings stay at 11 this evening and quarterback-related decisions get weird, at number 3 of the cheat sheet, this kid from Texas.
Byron Murphy, defensive tackle, 6'1", 308 pounds, Texas.
They get 15 yards here, and they go empty. Robertson in trouble, sacked it, back-to-back plays. This one back at the 14-yard line, Byron Murphy.
The 2023 Big 12 Defensive Lineman of the Year and a second-team All-American, Murphy teamed with T'Vondre Sweat to form arguably the best defensive tackle duo in the nation. He recorded 8.5 tackles for loss and 5 sacks, and showed off his versatility by scoring rushing and receiving touchdowns in goal line situations. Though he is undersized, Murphy wows with power and flexibility in his lower body and uses his quick hands to shed blocks. His athleticism and relentless energy will make him a coveted pick in the first round.
Vikes Bites!
Vikes Bites.
Thank you, Thousand Hills. And if you want to hear who my top 2 players are, the cheat sheet, the answer key for tonight's first round of the NFL draft, specifically with the purple, I think you should just chill out and keep listening to 9 to noon because Ben Lieber's in studio next, PA.
Yes, sir. You said it all. We'll be right back.